Hello everyone, my name is Sokol Chelo and I will present the paper Subnational Differences in International Trade Flows, a Dynamic View of U.S. State Export Profiles. Yannick Tams and myself are faculty at the Business School. Dmitry Zinoviev is Professor of Computer Sciences at the College of Arts and Sciences. This descriptive paper uses the tools of social network analysis to explore and analyze the international trade pattern of U.S. states. We first define the subnational level of analysis and discuss the literature on subnational heterogeneity. Next, we specifically focus on U.S. states and show some data to illustrate the heterogeneity across them. Then we talk about the state's specialization in export destinations. Further, we describe the data and methodology and discuss finally the findings. The notion of the nation-state underlies most of the fundamental theories of the MNC in international business and international economics. The sociological view to international business has further solidified the role of the nation-state by using constructs such as cultural and institutional distance. Such level of analysis, however, is unable to deal with two phenomena. The first is related to supranational institutions that regulate, among others, international trade. The other, and the more relevant to this paper, goes in the exact opposite direction and draws our attention to the subnational level. For the purpose of this paper, we define subnational level as the regional territory below the nation-state level and beyond the limits of individual cities. To fully review the literature on subnational level is outside the scope of this paper, but one way to summarize it is by focusing on its two main findings. The first is that there is substantial heterogeneity at subnational level along a wide range of socioeconomic, institutional, cultural, and geographic dimensions. The second is that this heterogeneity matters in that it helps explain various important outcomes such as location, entry modes, foreign affiliate performance, or trade patterns. Earlier, we defined the subnational level as one below the nation-state and above individual cities or communities. For more rigorous analysis, however, we need relatively homogeneous subnational entities whose political boundaries coincide with the institutional ones, and the US states meet this criteria. Even more so, given our focus on international trade flows at the subnational level, where the availability and reliability of data are important. US states are characterized by subnational cultural institutional heterogeneity, mostly going back to the history and evolution of the North American colonies, which were settled by people coming from various countries, example Great Britain, France, and Spain, with different religious, political, and cultural profiles. The initial isolation solidified further these different identities, resulting in many distinct nations existing within the US. To illustrate between states differences along some other dimensions, we put together a small sample of indicators. You can see, for example, striking differences in terms of GDP per capita across the US states. The concepts used to explain international trade at country level can be used at subnational level too. Similar to countries, states accumulate physical, human, institutional capital, resulting in specialization in a product mix. We call this product-specific resources. As states change their export mix, there is a tendency to move towards related rather than unrelated goods. Our main premise here, however, is that to be successful at exporting, states need not only superior products but also information about the destinations and more general social capital to connect to those destinations, for instance via the ethnic networks. We call this destination-specific resources, and again, changes in the endowment with destination-specific resources should push the states towards specialization in destinations that are similar along a variety of dimensions. Further, we can cluster states in terms of similarity of their destination portfolios. Such clustering should be stable as long as there are no external shocks. It is, however, interesting to see what happens to the clustering in moments of major changes. Now to data and methodology. Our main data source is the International Trade Administration Agency in the US Department of Commerce. Specifically, we retrieved export data for each US state and each of the 237 foreign countries for the period 1999 to 2018, and then created 10 two-year periods to account for some yearly fluctuations. With this data, we could calculate static clustering independently for each period and then look at the changes of static clustering over time. To build a network, we use the volume of exports from any state S to any destination C, normalized by the total volume of export from C as per this formula. The result is a weighted bipartite network where states and countries are network nodes. A state is connected to a country if there is a non-zero export from the state to the country. The normalized trade volume is the weight of the edge. We use the generalized relational similarity to project this network onto the set of state nodes, which is a new weighted network, and two nodes, S1 and S2, are connected if in the original network there are substantially many paths between S1 and S2 through the country nodes. The similarity is a number between -1 and 1, and we removed all edges with the weights smaller than 0.6 to focus on essential connections while avoiding excessive connectivity. Here is an example of static clustering for the 2003 and 2004 period. Here is the same clustering shown as a map of the United States. Now to the longitudinal aspect of clustering. This figure shows clustering over all 10 time periods. It is noticeable by a simple observation that there are two main disruptions of the pattern of clustering, namely here and here. To check this observation more rigorously, we estimated the magnitude of state drift from one cluster to another by calculating three clustering similarity measures: adjusted mutual information, normalized mutual information, and adjusted random score for each pair of consecutive time spans. All three measures seem to confirm the presence of two main discontinuities, here and here. It is not difficult to connect these two discontinuities to major events right before. In year 2002, 17 states, or 28% of US exports, had changes of the similarities of their destination portfolios. The year before, two major events had occurred that affected trade: the terrorist attack of September 11 and also China joining the WTO. More on that in the next slide. The other disruption is related to the financial crisis. To understand the role of China joining the WTO in 2001, here a so-called heat map showing the year-to-year correlations of exports from all states to China. Clearly, there is a substantial change in the pattern at this point. As a last illustration of how the data can be used, we try to understand what is behind the changes in clustering after external shocks. For instance, California, Washington State, and Connecticut were part of the same cluster before 2001-2003, but after Connecticut moved into a different cluster. Without claiming a rigorous analysis, we attributed this to the dissimilarity of resource portfolios. Different portfolios resulted in similar outcomes before, but the external shock caused a drastic rearrangement. This finding, along with some others not presented here, led us to theorize about the mechanism behind the changes in clustering. A first, incomplete as it turns out, explanation is that once the patterns of exports are disrupted due to exogenous shocks, restarting export activities is difficult. This might explain why the destination portfolio of each individual state might change, but leaves open the possibility that all states in a particular cluster change in the same way, leaving them as similar as before. Therefore, we think it's important to look at the similarity of the underlying product and destination resources across the states within the same cluster before the event. We argue that it is more likely that states with substantial resource similarity, think Washington State and California, are more likely to make similar changes and remain together after the event than states that have a more superficial similarity. In conclusion, we identified two major disruptions of the pattern of export destination similarity, suggesting that trade patterns follow a punctuated equilibrium. We theorized that states with similar resource profiles would specialize in similar countries, but it's also possible for different mixes of resources to result in similar destination portfolios. Major external shocks reshuffle the deck, so to say, and separate the two. Results of such analysis can be used for decision making for the exporting states to understand their position within a cluster vis-à-vis the others, as competitors or as collaborators that join forces to influence decision making at the federal level to their advantage. The importing countries can use these results as well to better understand when and how much to deal with the exporting states as opposed to the US as a country. Thank you for your attention.